Hey y'all, I'm Lindsay, 26, female. So here I am doing something I never thought I'd do, sharing a piece of my life on a public platform. Yikes. You see, I'm not one to flaunt things or share personal stuff, but this story is just too spicy not to share. Plus, I don't have many close friends to vent to, so here goes nothing. Let me get a few things straight before I dive into the meat and potatoes of this crazy experience. First, I've changed everyone's names in this story because, well, I don't want anyone potentially tracking me down and exposing me to the wrong people. You can't be too careful these days, especially when you're someone like me. You see, I grew up swimming in money, and I'm not going to lie, I was used to it. But don't get me wrong, I'm not some spoiled prissy brat. The reason I was able to live in luxury and have anything and everything I wanted was because of my dad, Austin, 60, male. He was and still is all about saving money. My dad's frugal behavior is one for the books. He always taught me the value and importance of money. I still remember his words like they were yesterday. The difference between billionaires and millionaires is that we don't spend all willy-nilly. We actually invest and save our money. They can buy yachts, and we can buy the oceans their yachts are on. I didn't even know classism existed amongst the 1%, but apparently it's a thing, LOL. And if it hasn't been clear already, my dad is a billionaire, and I am a billionaire. So despite my upbringing, I'm not the kind of person who shows off. You wouldn't even guess that I have money in the first place, let alone billions of it. I never liked the extra attention that came with it. As soon as people learned I was a billionaire, they'd either try to leech off me or keep their distance, assuming I was some spoiled brat. Hence my lack of close friends, as I mentioned earlier. The lack of friendships and connections I've had really left me desperate for human connection. I guess that's why I fell head over heels when I met Ernest, 28, male. Our paths crossed when I was in Dubai and he was there for business. I was enjoying a little family vacation at one of the hotels my dad owned. Ernest spotted me, and well, he didn't waste any time trying to strike up a conversation. Guess I intrigued the guy. It was the first time a guy was genuinely interested in me, so naturally I was smitten too. We started talking and it felt like we clicked from the very beginning. Ernest was charming, down to earth, and as I would later find out some days later, a millionaire. After a few days of talking, he opened up to me about his wealth. He told me how he was used to gold diggers wanting to be with him just for his money. You know, you're one of the good ones. God, I never thought I'd be able to find someone like you, but yet here you are. You're so down to earth and you're not pretentious, and I'll admit, I was a bit scared to tell you that I'm a millionaire so soon, but I can't help it. You're perfect, and I really feel like fate brought us together. You probably have never seen $1 million in your life, so you're so humble and sweet, and I could marry you right now. You can probably guess where this is going. I decided to lie. I confirmed his obviously wrong conclusions about me, that I was just from your stereotypical middle-class suburban family back home in the States. I even made up a story about winning this vacation through a university trip. Now, I know I was wrong for lying to this man, I'll admit it, but could you blame me? I was so desperate for love, and I was so scared of losing someone who would actually love me for me. Besides, he was a millionaire, so he understood money and the importance of it, or so I thought. So the difference between us wasn't going to be too bad when he eventually found out that I was a billionaire. I decided to keep up with this charade for a little while longer, just so that he wouldn't leave me as soon as he heard I was a billionaire, because I was scared that the tables would turn and he would turn into the gold digger, or even worse, dump me because he couldn't handle or keep up with me. Shout out to the fragility of the male ego. Plus, I wanted him to like me, you all, and he just couldn't stop gushing about how much he loved, how simple and manageable, his words, I was. Now, at the time, I didn't think much of what he was saying, but oh boy, they'd come back to haunt me later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So Ernest and I started dating, and for a while everything was great, but deep down I felt guilty for not being honest with him. about my true wealth. So Ernest and I eventually returned to the States and we decided to keep in touch. Things were going so well and I was having the time of my life, but there was this nagging guilt that I couldn't shake. I knew I had to reveal the truth to Ernest, but every time I thought about it, I'd get cold feet. Months went by and I still hadn't told him the truth. Meanwhile, Ernest was happier than ever, thinking he'd found the perfect future wife. But I couldn't keep up the facade forever. It was becoming more and more challenging. I even went as far as buying a house that looked pretty basic and middle class and hiring actors to pretend to be my family members because I hadn't told my father about this relationship. I knew he'd be furious once he found out, and sure enough, he did. One night after a dinner date in the Sky, Ernest made a comment that caught me off guard. "You know, you blow my mind every day." How? "We just had dinner in the Sky, Lindsay. People don't normally do that sort of thing." "Oh, yeah, I suppose not." "But you're so calm and laid back. It's like you're not impressed." "Oh, no, I am. Of course I am. Thank you for the lovely date. No, trust me, it's a good thing. It's refreshing. I've told you how much I adore your simplicity. It's a nice change of pace. I mean, my dates are normally starstruck, leaving their jaws on the floor whenever we go to the Eiffel Tower for dinner, or when we go ballroom dancing, or go to art auctions, or fly to Prague just to get those delicious pastries, or heck, even having a little trip on a small basic yacht. It's embarrassing. But you know how to act. You're never like that. You're so calm about everything. You never take advantage of me or act bougie or pretentious, and I love that about you." "Thanks, babe." What he didn't know was that I'd done all those things before the age of 10, so I was pretty used to it. But of course, I didn't let on. Then, right at that helipad, he got down on one knee and proposed to me. I was gagged, floored even. And what shocked me even more was that I immediately said yes. The next morning I woke up to a very angry text from my father demanding that I meet him immediately. I had to take a private jet to Cuba that very day to meet him. When I arrived, he was beyond furious. He started reading an article online about how Ernest, a very well-known and established millionaire businessman, was getting married to a mystery woman that nobody knew about. Dad read a direct quote from the article where Ernest said, "I would like to keep my wife's identity private, but just know we are very happy and beyond ecstatic to see where this goes." "How the heck did you know it was me?" He just laughed, one of those evil villain hearty laughs, and said, "Lindsay, darling, have I taught you nothing? Of course I was going to find out. I'll admit you did a good job hiding it for a while, but I have eyes and ears everywhere. Why did you keep this a secret from me? Is it because you knew I wouldn't approve?" "Yes. I knew you'd tell me to end things." "Well, you're right. I want you to end it immediately. We'll buy their silence. It's okay." "No, Dad. I love this man. You don't understand." I couldn't hold it back anymore and broke down crying. I spilled my heart out, telling him everything, how we met, how much I loved Ernest, and how I was willing to make things work between us. Dad asked me if Ernest knew that I was a billionaire, and I confessed that he didn't. Dad looked even more stressed out and frustrated, but then he asked me if I was certain about going through with this. I couldn't hold back my emotions and affirmed that I was. He finally said he'd support me, but on one condition. He wanted me to sign a prenuptial agreement when we got married. So several months went by, and the wedding preparations were in full swing. Ernest's mom, Myrtle, 57, female, and I hadn't spent any time together before this, mostly because Ernest didn't bring his dates home that often unless it was something serious. Myrtle knew that I had to be someone special for her son to bring me home, let alone marry me. Ernest had told me that his mother was ecstatic to meet me. But when we first met, her initial happiness quickly transformed into complete disgust when she saw me. We had the dinner and Myrtle began grilling me about my life, but not in the typical "I want to see if you're good for my son" kind of way. It was more like, "Are you bougie enough to fit in with us and our brand?" "So, why is it you decided to dress this way tonight? Didn't you know we were having dinner?" Mom, relax. I'm just asking. I think we need to call your stylist because this won't cut it, sweetie. As the dinner went on, Myrtle's disapproval of me became even more apparent. She kept nagging me, asking me if I had what it takes and telling me that I should do better for my man. This made me furious because I was proud of the way I looked and who I was. When the dinner finally ended, Ernest revealed to me that his mother didn't really like me. No surprise there. He explained that Myrtle was accustomed to a lavish lifestyle and preferred flashy things. Seeing someone like me wasn't what she had envisioned for her son. But he assured me that everything would be okay once we got married because then Myrtle would see that Ernest was genuinely in love with me. And despite the challenges and the lies, I was determined to make this work and prove that our love was stronger than any preconceived notions. The big day came and Ernest brought up the idea of a prenup the night before. And before you start, I know all that crap about how it's bad luck to see your man the night before the wedding, and maybe you're right, because with the way the story ends, I definitely got some bad juju for not listening to that stupid tradition. Anyways, like I was saying, Ernest brought up signing a prenup. I was low-key grateful for him saying it before I got the chance to say it, because I bet he would have found it super suspicious for me to want a prenup in the first place. It was definitely better for him to suggest it, and then we moved forward. So when he said it, I just agreed. As you can imagine, Ernest was over the moon, thinking I was certainly the one because I went along with the prenup so easily and without any pushback. He saw it as the ultimate test to check if I was genuinely committed or just after his money. The wedding was simple and nice, just what I wanted. I didn't want anything flashy that would give away my family's wealth. Myrtle, of course, wasn't thrilled about the modest celebration. She had hoped for something huge and grand, but Ernest didn't care about that. He said he was just eager to marry me quickly, believing he found the perfect wife. On our wedding night, Ernest spilled the beans that he bought a mansion in a new neighborhood and we were going to spend the rest of our lives there. So that's what we did. We moved from where we were staying before to this new place, and things were going great between us during our honeymoon phase. A couple of months went by and I unfortunately had to face the music. Myrtle started bothering me more frequently than usual. She wanted me to change my appearance for her son, forcing me to wear 6-inch heels on a daily basis, which was definitely not my style. I kept refusing her advice and complained to Ernest. At first he told her to back off, but it didn't last and we would repeat the ugly cycle again, with Myrtle despising me more and more when I would reject her attempts to change who I was. One day Myrtle tried her BS again, giving me backhanded compliments and telling me that I would be better than ever if I just listened to her. As usual, I would tell Ernest to check his mama, but this time things were different. Ernest surprised me by actually agreeing with his mother. I know, right? Like, what the frick? He said, it's about time you started acting, what can I say, proud. Yeah, I think that's the right word. It's about time you started acting proud of me. But I am proud of you. I don't get what my appearance has to do with that. Don't get me wrong, I love the look, babe. It's just you aren't representing me well. I don't want you to be flashy and trashy, but just, dress up a little. Gussy up more often. This revelation bothered me and it made me see our relationship differently. I started to realize that Ernest didn't want a partner to have fun with. He wanted a pretty trophy wife who knew when to stay quiet and not misuse his funds. As time passed, he became less affectionate and more controlling. I began to question everything, but the fear of being alone stopped me from doing anything. I thought I could handle staying with him even though our relationship was losing its warmth and he was becoming more controlling. One day I accidentally stumbled upon Ernest's text where he and his mom were gossiping about me. They were saying I wasn't the right fit for him and I was the opposite of a millionaire's wife. There was even one comment that said I looked too poor to even be considered middle class, and I'll admit that one stung a little. But what hurt me most was that Ernest was actually part of this bullying crap. It was clear to me that Ernest was determined to mold me into something more appealing. Seeing those texts was a major turn-off, and I started treating him coldly, which made him act feistier and more resentful because he didn't know that I knew that he was talking smack about me. As I distanced myself more and more, Ernest got shouty, demanding my submission and throwing my middle-class status in my face. According to him, I knew nothing about the life of a millionaire, and he insisted I listen to him if I wanted to survive in his world. If only he knew people like me could eat people like him for breakfast. Feeling trapped, I desperately wanted the old Ernest to come back, to love me fully like I knew he could. But that wasn't happening. He was too far gone in his quest for a perfect Barbie doll wife, and Myrtle wasn't making things any better either. She started openly insulting me, questioning why her son would ever marry someone like me. Ernest went from trying to ignore his mom's hurtful comments about me to low-key agreeing with her, and eventually full-on belly laughing when she insulted me right in front of him. "Lindsay, dear, why on earth did you choose that dress? It makes you look like a frumpy school teacher. God." "Yeah, Lindsay, I probably shouldn't say this, but why don't you try dressing more like my mom?" "You know what? You're right. You should have kept that to yourself." "No, he has a point, dear. It's embarrassing." "Whatever, Myrtle. And your hair, darling, it's so plain. You really should do something with it. Maybe hire a stylist for once. I mean, you have the money now. There are certainly no excuses." "Mom's got a point, you know. A little glam won't hurt." "Honestly, Ernest, I can't fathom why you married her. You could have had any woman in the world, someone with a bit more flair." "Flair? Yeah. Lindsay, maybe you should take some notes from Bella Hadid or Kim Kardashian." "I mean, just look at her son. She's not even trying. Can't you see what a mistake you've made?" "Mom, you're too much. But seriously, Lindsay, you should definitely consider a makeover. Spice things up a bit." I was sick of it all and didn't know what to do, so I decided to call my father. He asked about my married life, but I hesitated. The plan was for me to spill the beans, to tell him he was right about everything and move back home, but I didn't want to burden him with the trash that was my marriage. And also, I didn't want to admit that I had failed. I mean, it had been a year and I was ready to call it quits. It would be a huge hit to my ego, and he probably would have started World War III if he knew how miserable I was. Dad asked again if everything was okay. I lied and said everything was fine. He was suspicious, of course, but he told me he was always a call away if things went south. He threatened to make Ernest and his family suffer if they ever treated me poorly. If only he knew. I thanked him and then I hung up. I felt like I owed it to myself and my dad to try, so I decided to start trying harder to please Ernest and Myrtle, thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd get their approval if I obeyed their wishes. In just a month, I transformed myself to fit the mold of those bougie housewives from TV, all the while still trying to be quiet and demure, as Myrtle would say all the time. I was like a sexy little mouse, honestly. I was sure that these two would finally appreciate me and care for me. When I tell you I had a complete makeover, I'm saying I was looking like I could live in the hills. You'd think this would finally please Ernest and Myrtle, but nope. Not a nod of acknowledgement for all the efforts I put into changing myself physically and socially. They just found more ways to tear me down, and I couldn't figure out why they were still being so mean. One day during Myrtle's usual weekly visits to see her son, and I guess continue her insult parade, I snapped. I yelled at Ernest and Myrtle, calling them heartless and unreasonable for the crap they were pulling me through. And then Myrtle started shouting back, telling me she never liked me and wished something tragic could happen to get me out of their lives forever. "Since we're laying our cards on the table, Lindsay, I've always despised you. You're so annoying, and your poorness makes me sick. I literally haven't done anything to make you hate me. I'm sorry you're a miserable bigot, and you have about as much emotional intelligence as Hitler." "Hitler? That's it? Ernest, I'm kicking your wife out of this house. Even the maid's bathroom is worth more than this worthless cockroach." "Excuse me? Did you say you're kicking me out?" "Yep, And Ernest isn't opposed to it one bit, are you, Ernest? I think everyone needs a little space. See? He agrees with me. This isn't some charity case, okay? People like you can't be here. Then she went to the window and pointed at a huge mansion that was recently renovated across the road and said, "If you want, you can go and ask them for help. Seems like they have more than enough money to go around, so they'll happily donate you some money since you're poor, ugly, and desperate. Nobody wants you here. So you need to go right now. Go and grovel and beg people for help and money, since that's where you belong." After Myrtle finished her insult marathon, telling me to go beg the people in the big mansion for help, that's when I smirked and spilled the tea. I revealed that they'd happily donate anything I asked for because, surprise, my dad owned that mansion. Myrtle and Ernest laughed, calling me crazy for such a wild claim. Myrtle spilled that some billionaire had recently bought and renovated the house for some reason, and that it was insulting to ever associate myself with the likes of him. I cut her off, showing a picture of me and my dad chilling on the beach, and their faces turned ghostly pale. "This is the guy you're talking about?" Myrtle finally gathered herself, asked how I knew this man and had a picture with him. "Oh, Myrtle, you poor pathetic woman, you don't know what you've just done." I dropped the bomb, confessing I was Austin's daughter and a billionaire. Myrtle started crazy laughing. She was in denial, so I couldn't really blame her, but Ernest looked pissed. He started cursing and saying that there was no way Austin was my dad. So guess what I did, you all? I strolled right down to that mansion across the street, called my dad out, and he emerged after a couple of minutes, looking a bit embarrassed. "How did you figure it out, kiddo?" I found it odd how there was some billionaire who had randomly decided to renovate this perfectly good mansion with all of the things my dad seemed to like a tennis court, golf course. It was crazy to me. At first I thought it couldn't be you. You're way too frugal for that. But then I remembered that you're also crazy and crazy rich, so you can do whatever you want. Also, you're not the only one who has friends in high places, so I knew it was you. "Well played, kiddo, well played. I guess you are my daughter after all, so your being smart was just bound to happen. I just wanted to make sure my baby girl was all right. I knew you were lying when you talked a month ago, so I just had to come here and keep an eye on you. But of course I had to add a little taste to this godforsaken place. And in the span of 2 weeks, no less? Sounds like a very Austin thing to do. You know that I'll combust if I don't play tennis or golf. I was planning on staking out here for a while, so I had to make myself comfortable." Ernest and Myrtle were left outside their home. Their faces a mix of disbelief and shock, like they'd just seen Jesus walking by. I shot them a cheeky flip-off before sauntering into the mansion to have a cozy chat with my father. Dad wasn't wasting any time. He demanded the lowdown right then and there, and I spilled the beans on how I'd been treated like garbage during the past year, all because I thought I was in love. He let me drone on and on about how I tried my best with them, and without saying a word, Dad marched up to Myrtle and Ernest, who was still standing outside. I watched from the window. I couldn't hear the specifics, obviously, but I knew Dad was throwing around some serious threats. Ernest hit his knees. Myrtle started crying, hunching over her son like she just witnessed the apocalypse. She started shouting how sorry she was and saying that she wanted to come over to me and apologize, but my dad told her to stay in her lane. I could now hear some parts of the conversation because I stepped outside to get a better look, and Dad was marching his way back over. I could hear her say, "Oh, God, I'm so sorry, Lindsay. I'm so sorry." I'm still trying to get my dad to tell me what he told them to make them crumble so fast, but my dad told me that he'd never tell. Spooky, I know. But all I cared about was that the mission was accomplished. I was no longer tied to those awful people, and what's worse, they were embarrassed and scared, and let me tell you, there's no better revenge.